Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We are experienced investors with a huge advantage as we have been able to learn from our family that has well over 100 years of experience in real estate and other alternative investments. Here on Master Your Millions, we seek to share that experience that we've learned and expand our knowledge as we talk to the top leaders in alternative areas of financing. We are super excited for our guest today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, Scott, we need to be a little bit careful here. We have Christina Mangino from Las Vegas. And yes, that is an Italian name, and she was born and raised in Las Vegas. And some of her family background we may or may not discuss on this podcast. I'm kidding. Christina has been in the financial arena essentially since schooling. She has a CFP, a CKA, a CRWA, ABC, DEF, GHIJK. Designation. The really cool thing is where Christina and I met, kind of hit it off that what she does, and she does all these different financial planning, but what her real passion is about is helping families navigate the relationship part. In the event you were to think of a family balance sheet, there would really be four things. There's the human capital, there's intellectual capital, there's organizational capital, and financial capital. And really most people, and what we've talked a lot about on this podcast, has all been about money, dollars and cents, and how to get there. Yet in the family balance sheet, the human capital or the relationship is probably even more valuable. And I believe you say, Christina, something about when you don't deal with the relationship or you give up the relationship for the money, both of them are going to be gone in the end. So she is an expert in family relationship, money mindset, and also working on multiple streams of income. So welcome, Christina. We're so happy to have you here.
Well, thank you, Scott and Jason. Wonderful introduction. And I'm excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about, and we might get a little bit raw here. You had been in the financial industry a very long time, 5, 6, 7 years, and then some changes happened in your family. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was actually about 15 years. So yeah,
I know I
started when I was 4. I know. So been in financial services, started right out of college, and really working with families to really live their life on purpose. And through that journey, about 10 years in, we then, on our own family, started our own family trust. First 5 years, kumbaya, we're sharing real estate, we're growing. And then about 5 years in, we were not prepared for my dad starting to go through a debilitating lung disease. Grandma had stage 4 cancer. I had another grandma in hospice. And my grandfather had just passed away. So a tsunami really took our family from harmony and everything's wonderful to really chaos. And the biggest part of that was not the financial, legal, and technical details. We had all those handled. It was really in our relationships. You know, we have certain family members that are really facing, death in the eye, they're staring death in the eye, and, their thoughts changed, their fears changed. And so everything changed on their level. And then you've got the younger generation who's in the growing and building. And so that pull of what to do and what to sell and what we're going to do with the money, just relationally, specifically my dad and I just really started to go at it. And I remember thinking, here I am, somebody with legal, technical, financial knowledge. I, have, certifications in communication and personality profiling and so many things on a communication level. And if this is happening in my family, then no wonder right now, statistically, only 1 in 10 families actually become multi-generational.
Is it that high? 1 in 10?
I'd
say it's a lot less.
So statistically right now, 70% of generational wealth passed to the second generation is gone. By the second generation, they spend it all. And then 90% is gone by the third generation. So only 1 in 10 families actually continue past the third generation.
Wow. So you were very kind in how you said that you and your dad were rubbing each other wrong, and not that you got along really well throughout your life. I mean, you were a pretty good kid, and dad loved his daughter, and yet it was simply the life changes that caused that. And yet in the moment, it was hard to recognize that. I'm assuming hard to realize that really this is in the moment pressure, and you were completely unprepared for that, is what I'm hearing. And so you decided to start helping people prepare for or even navigate once they're in that situation. How is it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, one thing I always say is, like, when you're in the glass, it doesn't matter how much training, how much knowledge, how many tools are in your toolbox. Your family knows every button, every sore spot, every wound that you have. So for me, it's like, while I had all these tools and I had everything, it does, when you're in the glass of the emotions, and, and also for me, like, my daddy's my hero. I mean, he's so for me, like, even watching him and his body change, and he was on full-time oxygen and had his little oxygen thing he's carrying around. And, so really it was I mean, essentially there was an immense amount of trust, because I had three generations and 4 units, family units, that all gifted me their assets to entrust, to manage, and to oversee. And so, yeah, there was immense amount of trust in our family. But when you're not getting oxygen, your brain's not getting the same level, and you're worried about your wife, and you're worried about your family. It just, for my dad, he started questioning everything. So then for me, I'm turning myself into a pretzel, going to him in a Word doc, and so I started turning myself into a pretzel. And in reality, it was just, we needed somebody outside of us so I could be the daughter. And I wasn't everybody's financial planner. Everybody, I was the trustee of the family. I needed to be the daughter. I needed to be on the outside of the table, not being the one that everybody was coming to looking to solve everything. And that was one of my biggest learnings.
So I'm hearing then your service to families is exactly that, being the third party that's I don't know whether rational thinker is the right thing to say, or non-emotional thinker at that moment, and say, this is really the best thing here and this bad thing. Because I get the thing that I'm from a family of 9 kids, and there's 25 years between myself and my oldest brother, and we're in different parts of life. He wants to kick back and enjoy what he has and spend everything that he gets. I'm in the mode where I want to build for my kids and plan and save and work to build, and that can really be raw. I mean, can be tough.
Yeah, and depending on how it's set up and created, like, the initial intention of doing this for our family was for the point where family started getting to health needs. My dad had already gone through a quadruple bypass, a major back surgery. Grandma had already had her stage 4 cancer, back when we started this. So a lot of this was to protect for the next generation from health ailments, and the unforeseen and the unknown. So while the intention we did that was at the beginning. So now you fast forward 10 years, and we really didn't have that strong, like, mission together of, like, what's the missional purpose of this money? Like, what are we really doing here? Why are we doing this together? Why are we, versus just, because while on the surface, it's like, yeah, I want to give money to the next generation, but why? For what purpose? Because also there's plenty of things that go on with just giving them a bunch of money that they're not prepared for. If you study, like, the lottery effect, when somebody gets an immense amount of money that they're not prepared for, and their neurology of their body has never been one that knows how to steward that, like, that's that's a jolt to the system. And especially if they've got some of their, when you think of money mindset and what they've got underneath, if they don't have the mindset to be able to take that money, it's just going to repel from them. And so a lot of the same thing happens in families, where if they don't know why they're doing this, why are they actually rowing together? And the families that I'm working with, I mean, it's not just the business, but it's like they have these employees that they've had for 20, 25, 30 years that are like family to them, that they also want to make sure they're taken care of. They've now usually become very prominent in their community, and they're giving back at a high level. And so really, if all of a sudden everything goes away, these families that they really care for, these communities that they care for, all go away. And so when there's not that communication and figuring out, why are we doing this? Are our values aligned? What are we actually going toward? But also on the basic level, do we like each other? Like, families love each other out of love and family, but really to like each other and enjoy, and not turn every family meeting that's a business meeting, where it's just, there's no like connection anymore. And it's just constantly business, or, whatever it is. And so it's really that communication piece and knowing ourselves and knowing others. And when we know ourselves from a, like for me, I am a high lion. I mean, so anybody that's done profiles, DISC, the D, I am that high controller at 100%. And my promoter, or my otter, as we call them, is right at like 97. So it's kind of like a joke sometimes of like, we're going to go have fun and it's going to be so much fun, but we're going to do it this way. We're having fun this way, But for me, I've learned myself. And so for me, because I am that high lion, I can show up with my roar pretty high. But in reality, that doesn't work for, my dad, who's a golden retriever and just wants everything to be in harmony and peace and wants no conflict and get along. And when you have all these opposing differences, and also, what's our love language as a family? Like, I'm a quality time. So for me, quality time means the phone's not at the table. We're not, if we're sitting and we're together, you're not on your phone. And who's the worst at it? My 89-year-old grandmother. She's the worst. She's always on her phone doing an email. And I'm like, Grandma, we're here. We're together. You wanted to spend time together. But me knowing that's my quality time, but she's not quality time. So when you really start to understand the dynamics of each other, and so that's really what the process is about, is introducing the family to each other, helping them understand where they're uniquely, just perfectly made, uniquely different. And also, what are the needs of each other, that if you've got, one who's acts of service quality time, and or acts of service love language, and you got one that's quality time, they're speaking completely different languages. So one can just be do and do and do, and I'm doing all these things and I'm just doing all over you, but no one's appreciating it. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, but that's not their language. If they're quality time, they want you. They don't want you going to do 12,000 errands and doing 12,000 things. So it's that simplicity of it, that just simply like helping them understand each other, the core needs of love. And at some point after, several months as we're together, we will at some point get to, what are potentially some of the wounds underneath that have not healed, that you don't even realize come out in your normal communication.
Okay, so let's assume for a second that I'm sold. I want Christina's services. Walk us through, and I want to talk a little bit to the listeners for a minute. This is extremely important, the relationship in your family, and really, because if we're going to build millions during our lifetime, and we're going to enjoy millions during our lifetime, and then we want to pass those millions on, we want to do it in a way that's truly going to benefit the next generation. We don't want to do harm. And on our part of our exit strategy was we're exiting this world. We don't want it to be painful. We want it to be pleasant, and knowing that everything's in order and things are going to be good, and there's not going to be division amongst our cherished children and our people that we care about the most. So back to you, Christina. What is there a 4-step? Do you have a 4-step process? Is it a 12-step process like the AA? Is it how? what do you kind of walk us through a general outline how you would start to work with a family? And maybe I'm getting hold of myself. I mean, where would you ideally like to start? I mean, would you be starting to talk to Scott, who has recently been married, and he should start that discussion now? Or is it something like me, where I have 6 children and 2 of them married? Or should I be waiting another 10 years until I have, 5 grandchildren? Or just kind of give us an idea. Who's the ideal person?
Yeah. So first, the ideal person is someone that also wants to be proactive. Yes, while the process can be when there's already the conflict has arisen, but if there's a super hyper level conflict and they've been in conflict for 20 years, they're going to probably need to start in a different place. I really focus more on those that, they just more feel like, you know what, I feel like they're speaking Greek and I'm speaking Chinese. Like we're saying the same thing, but it's just not working. So it's like there's that a little bit of irritation level, but it's not at the point where no one's speaking, the attorneys are involved. I mean, like, the rupture's not so damaged that you can't even get everybody in the same room. So they know that the communication's not, what it should be. And also they're really looking forward saying, I want to make sure our family doesn't go from harmony to chaos. I want to keep our family in harmony no matter what happens when conflicts arise. Because here's the thing, it's family, and whether it's going to happen, because really most people focus on, when you think of business owners, they're really strong on focusing on team culture, team building, and really structuring that team to continue to thrive. But I very rarely have ever heard of a family focusing in the same thing, because really they are a team. They're doing family, business, and money together. So for me, the ideal client is, so for you, Jason, you say you're ready. I'm going to also assume your lovely, beautiful bride is as well. And so really we start at whoever is the nucleus, and it could be any generation. It could be you, or it could be Scott, and so it's whatever generation says, we're ready to start this process. I want to also lead my family, because my job isn't to come in and be with you forever and you guys use me as your forever safety net. My job is to come in and give you the tools that the next generation can continue to do it on their own. So you say you're ready, you and your bride are ready, we're going to start. The first is going to be to have a conversation to find out, what is your intention? What is your goal? What are some of the points of maybe contention at the moment? Or is it just simply to make sure we have a strong foundation of trust and unity that's going to go through the generations? So where are you at today? What does that look like? And then we start with assessments. So in the beginning, whoever we're actually working with, whether it's starting with the couple and then we're bringing the generations in, or are we actually coming in and actually wanting to start to do effective family meetings? Are we wanting to do a family retreat? So is it like, you're ready to start with everybody, or are you starting with just the two of you and you want to lead the next generation in? Because what we find is really that the two that created the wealth, traditionally, it's that first generation, from generation to generation 1 to 2 is usually the hardest transition. When it goes from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, it's always the transition from 1 to 2, because the first generation, they're the ones that had to scrub toilets, miss payroll, like it's their baby, and they have so much like built into that they have all of these fears and worries and everything of like what will happen. But once the transitions happen the first time, the next generation, they know it's going to happen. It's not a question of, are we going to transition? What does it look like? How do we give it? When do we give it? When do we tell them? By the time you've already passed the second generation, they already have the mindset of, this is just what's happening. Like, we are going to pass to the next generation. So they're already going to have a different way of thinking as they're building and growing and bringing that third generation in. So traditionally, the first generation is where we start with the foundation and then bring the next, but we've started with the whole family together. It just depends on where they're at in their need, but we're going to start with assessments. We're going to then move into setting up the tools. So there's certain tools for a family to realize the communication strategy. What are the ground rules? What's the playing field that we're all going to say? We're going to be direct, truthful, and honest. And we're going to, agree to that. Doesn't mean there's ever going to be conflict, because conflict's healthy. And most people don't realize conflict is just growth waiting to happen. And, it's just how you handle conflict and how you work with each other that makes conflict go sour. But if you have tools that allow you to deal with conflict in a healthy way, it usually actually is a catalyst for growth. And then once we're actually getting into the foundational tools and we're laying that, we're also doing consistent assessments. So one of them is like your life 7 F's. How would you rate yourself in 1 to 10 with your relationship with your spouse, your children, the people that are important to you? How do you rate yourself for fun? Are you having fun in your life? For some personality styles, that's not as important. For me as a high otter, if I'm not having fun, I'm not a happy girl. And so certain personality styles, fun is going to mean differently. How do you rate yourself with your friends? How do you rate yourself spiritually? How do you rate yourself with work, fitness? And so we're doing assessments also to know, where is your love tank on a scale of 1 to 10 with your spouse? Where is your safety gauge, your meter? So we're checking all of these different areas where each month we're checking in. And then the process just continues from there of, are we laying a foundation for how to have effective family meetings? And we're actually teaching you how to lead family meetings. Are we taking you on a family retreat and the family's going to do ropes courses together, and they're going to actually do team building exercises to really have that family culture of, you're here because you love each other and you want to enjoy each other, but you're also doing business together because you want to leave an impact from more than one generation. So it's like you want to have both, where my family got really heavy on doing the business together. And not that we weren't having dinners together and doing that, but then I'm showing up to family dinner and everybody's asking me a question about something in business. And I'm like, stop. I got the daughter hat on right now. I'm here to have fun, have a glass of wine, and, break bread together. I'm not here to, be the financial planner. I'm off. It's Saturday night. We're having fun. So sometimes that line of like the family business conversations come into the dinner table, and we need to, start to set, healthy ways to be able to walk that together so that everybody gets to enjoy each other and you get to have a great impact for generations.
So some of the tools, and I guess one of the things I keep wanting to hear from you is, are the wills and trusts in place? Is that what you do, or is it more that, okay, we have those tools, how do we best use them?
Yeah, so when I'm walking with a family, I don't have my financial planner hat on at all. So, and for me, I've made a personal choice that I will only sit on one side of the fence for a family. So the families that I am their financial planner, I won't actually be their relational guide through this process. And one reason is when we're going through the relational side, I need it to be a fully pure relationship. I need them to be able to, I can say the hard things, and when dad's being a roaring lion and being, and just not showing up in a way that's loving, I need to be able to be direct with him and be truthful with him and not worry about, and so to me, when you blur those lines together, in my opinion, some could probably do it great. But what I'm sitting on, if I'm the relational guide and walking with families, that's the only hat I'm wearing with them, because it's a very sacred space, because in reality, they're sharing a lot of stuff with you. They're really unfolding and they're really getting to a personal. And as we're peeling the onion back in so many ways. And so as time goes on, when I'm in a financial space, they want my advice. They want me to tell them what to do. What do you do? So it's a completely different role, where when I'm on the relational side, I don't give them any answers. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm not the expert. I'm simply the facilitator, facilitating them through a process that allows them to discover how they're communicating with each other, how they're showing up for their wife, how they're loving them well. So all those things, I'm not there to tell them what to do. I'm there to guide them through a process, because, what we found is, and I'm sure you guys can, appreciate this, is like somewhere in your life where if someone just told you, hey, you should stop eating potato chips. Okay, great. Yeah, I know I should stop eating potato chips or whatever. But if all of a sudden you, for some reason, come to this epiphany and you're having this like experience, and all of a sudden you realize potato chips are killing me, when you realize it, it's a whole different ballgame than when someone tells you you should do it. And so that's for me, when you're almost sitting on different sides of the fences. On the financial planner, they want me to help them come up with a financial plan to live the life the way they want, but they want advice. And on the relational side, I'm being quiet. I'm asking powerful questions, leading them through how to utilize the tools, learn the tools, implement the tools, but I'm not advising them. Does that answer your question?
Sure does.
So one of the questions I have is, how do you bridge the gap, whether it's communication or financially, to get everyone on the same page when you have maybe two opposite perspectives or two completely different personalities? Because this subject is close to home. You know, this is something that our family has dealt with, and I've watched as a third generation on the outside as we've tried to figure all of this out. Although, like, what happens if the steward, say you for your family, had a change of thought? Oh, you know what? We need to live more on this, when potentially you have the youngest who's doing the opposite. How would you suggest to bridge something like that?
First, that's one of why doing it proactively, versus reactively. So kind of when the tension's already there, it's kind of like there's an outcome that everybody wants, and everybody wants the opinion to be skewed toward their outcome. Versus when it's proactively, when everybody's starting to understand their own personality styles, each other's, and the reason we use lion, otter, golden retriever, beaver is because it makes it fun as well. There's a lot of science behind the test as well, but really it's fun where it's like, oh, dad's otter's coming out again. Oh, there's their beaver, and so it gives them also a way to now start to identify those differences. Because when you're not aware, it just seems like, oh, they're being controlling, they're being bossy, or you know what, they're really avoiding conflict and they won't talk about it. Or, they're so buried in the data and the detail and the facts, they're not even realizing we're here in person talking to each other. So one, when you start to understand each other's, but then also what's underneath that's happening that's not being said. Because usually on the surface, the first layer of the onion is not actually what's happening. And so part of it is actually, we're doing a lot of processing to say, okay, this is what you're saying. Okay, tell me more. Okay, tell me more. And so sometimes we realize that the symptom is not the root of what's going on. And so part of that is, first, they need to understand each other and also understand at a core need, how do they feel loved? And sometimes they start to understand that the personality differences, their difference in their love language and how they are loved, that, once they start to understand that, now when they're coming together to have a critical conversation over differences or difference to do, it gives them, but also we need to come to a core value place that are the values aligned. Because if the values aren't aligned, our values drive our beliefs, which drive our behavior. And so at the core level, if our values are not aligned, we're not going to be motivated to move toward action. And so sometimes it might be, hey, that's going to be your initiative, this is going to be mine. And so I don't know what specifically you meant by differences. But if it's like, hey, I want to invest in this and you want to invest in this, well, now it's like, okay, where's the solution of, is it that we have differences and you want to invest in this type of thing and I want to invest in this type of thing? And is it a value difference? Is it a resource difference? But really, once you understand each other, now that conversation can start differently of, are our values aligned to take action on this? And if we're at completely opposite values, just having that awareness that we might not come to an agreement in this place, but is it okay that we have understanding where each other are versus having to agree? And really understanding is a monumental foundation in all of this, because, I can understand where my dad's coming from and not agree with him.
So are you seeing the drop off between the generations from 1 to 2? There's a huge drop off, much more compared to 2 to 3. Is that simply because that 1 to 2, most of these kinks are kind of pounded out and worked out? And if you can get through that process, the next generation is, oh, if we've got disagreement, we go through A, B, C, D. Here are the steps. This is how we go about it, versus previous generation where they've got to figure that out. So more as there's a structure to it beforehand.
So when you say drop off and not participating, drop off and the financial money's gone, what does drop off mean to you?
I'm talking like the percentages, because you said from 1 to 2, there's a 70% drop off from generation to 1 to 2. And then you said, what was it, 20 from 2 to 3?
So 70% of wealth that's passed from the first to second generation is spent in the second generation. So now I'll use it. So 7 out of 10, the money doesn't go to the third generation. So really now only 3 out of 10 families actually pass money to the third generation. So the drop off is in the money being spent. And so 85% of the time, the data shows it's because of trust and communication. Only 5% of the time is it because they didn't have like their financial or their legal or any of that done. And 10% of the time, it's because they didn't prepare the next generation for that responsibility. So if we look at really the high number, 85% of the time, it's simply trust and communication because they haven't laid a foundation. You know, like how many businesses do you know that haven't put, time into communicating with their team? How do I communicate with my team? How do I lead them well? And yes, there are certain businesses that don't, but successful businesses, if you look, they spend an amount of time building that culture. And part of that culture is, are we aligned in our vision? Are we aligned in our values? Do you believe in the mission? So a big part of that is in that trust and communication is first they have to understand, like, why are we doing this? For what purpose? What is the purpose of our wealth? And we find that when you start defining the purpose, getting to know each other really well, now it doesn't mean you're 100% aligned in every decision, but you now have the tools to say, oh, you want to do this initiative and this initiative. Do we have the resources to do both? Great. You now can lead that initiative. I lead this one, and so it really, this process, when you really look at it, it's not just simply like, hey, I passed $1 million to Johnny and he can do whatever he wants with it. Like, you're just basically saying, hey, I'm just passing it. Whatever happens, happens. I'm dead. Doesn't matter. Versus when you really look at families that are saying, we're shifting the business. We actually want the business leadership to shift between generations and continue. We actually want our foundation, our donor advised funds, like whatever they're doing in a community aspect, we want that leadership. So it's really the transition in leadership from whatever they're doing together versus, hey, I'm just going to pass it to them and whatever they do, they do. Now, to me, there's a lot of danger in that because if you're, just giving money to somebody that doesn't have the capabilities, you could really be setting them up to do a lot of personal damage for themselves if they don't have the money mindset and the way of thinking to handle that kind of, a large amount of money. But really this process, it's for those that are actually have a transition in leader, because, these families at this point are creating a family enterprise. They've got the family office team that's helping them run. Their family wealth has now become a family enterprise and a business within itself, even if there's not a business.
I like it. I love it. The idea of having the family playing together, because it's like, I think you've said a number of times, we're going to take a family retreat or a business trip, and the part of the business trip is flat out fun, and maybe we compartmentalize it, and some of it this is the ideas of the family. This was the original intent, because that's what I see where I've seen that, like the couple that, or the generation that generated the wealth, they had this certain type of mindset, and this is how they did things, for the fact that it was beat into them, right? Blood, sweat, and tears. And they simply want people to get along. However, the next generation didn't go through that, and they don't recognize that, and they don't have the same mindset that this is the families, and we're going to get in the event we really want to do something special, it must stay together, and we must stay together. As and about it, I know you do a lot with insurance and the infinite banking concept, that we can truly generate intergenerational wealth, and it can be magnified in the passing from generation to generation, for the fact that we can do it on a tax advantage basis. However, it makes no sense when all it's going to do is become a liquidity event for someone, and it's split. You take this amount of money, divide it by the number of heirs, and you're done. That's all the planning is. When in reality, if you keep it together, there's synergism, if you will, and having bigger pools of money and bigger people together, all working around the same problem.
They could just take the infinite banking system, just looking at that. I mean, that in and of itself is a phenomenal tool. And also, you need to understand it. So if we just look at from that concept, is like, okay, the first person who created it now understood it. If they don't prepare that next person to truly understand the impact, the purpose, and all the capabilities of what it can do, well, then they're just like, yeah, I don't understand it and whatever. And then they just dismantle it, And so it's like, always says like, how much money should I give my kids? And we say, how much do you want to prepare them? And I think that's a big piece is like, if any of this is like, if you're not preparing them, then they don't really understand the purpose and the reason and all the great things that I, created this great infinite banking system that has all these great tools. But if they don't understand it, like you've got to prepare them to be able to understand the impact it can have.
Cool. And that's where you come in, is helping people be prepared for that, actually doing that, the nuts and bolts. And truly, talking to our listeners, I'm not sure that I've met anybody quite as capable or dialed into that one point as Christina is. She's really passionate and dialed into that point, the relationship. It's not, all these other things are superfluous, or they're on the outside. Dialing in that relationship, everything else is going to go much more smoothly. I hope they can edit that out. So Christina, I've been so awesome to have you on the show today. And I keep thinking to myself, well, how do we say something that say, in the event you have X question, this question, or this situation, you should contact Christina, when the reality is every listener should be contacting you and simply at least visiting your website, getting a feel for what you do and understanding, because I know how about relationship and start that, at least that thought process happening. I don't care whether you have a 2-year-old or you have 20 great grandchildren. Those are the range of people that need to be talking to Christina. We're going to put your contact information in the show notes down below. Parting thoughts, words that you'd say, advice.
When it comes to the side of, like, everybody calls it sometimes the soft side or the fluffy side, and because you can't see it the same way, my one encouragement is you want to do it when your family's in harmony. Because once you've shifted into chaos, and like my family, I know, Jason, you had an experience with your family as well, that once the chaos hits, it's so much harder to come back from it, versus if you really truly want to have a multi-generational impact, and we call it the 7 generations. Like, if you really have that goal, if you're not protecting the most valuable asset, the relationships, then then you might as well just give it to them and tell them to do what they want with, because the relationships are the key to actually have that true impact. Because no one sets out to have their legacy destroyed by fighting, and so no one's intention is that. So you've got to be intentional about making sure the relationships of your legacy last.
Love it. And that's truly what it all boils down to. And that's really what matters most, are people.
Yep.
So thank you so much, Christina. We've really enjoyed this, and we need to bring you on again soon.
Awesome. It's been fun.
Remember, guys, if you would like to connect with us, hit us up on our Facebook group, Instagram, Twitter, or shoot us an email. All the links are in the show notes down below. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. Last, remember, mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. Catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.